I first met Paul Spong in 1974. He had just started Orca Lab and was hanging out with a wild and crazy guy called Robert Hunter. And they, together with a gang around them, had started this thing called Greenpeace. At the time, I was struggling to keep City TV alive and spending most of my time in sort of emergency finance and not that happy about not doing the TV and, you know, wondering what's it all about, Alfie. And meeting these guys was a tonic. Their idealism, their conversion of thought into action. And in particular, I remember an afternoon when they dragged me, urban jungle kid. I understand concrete and asphalt, and I don't know, grass still makes me nervous a little bit. And they took me out on a boat. It was my first big trip to the West Coast, and we ran along the coast. And by some kind of magic, Paul summoned the mines in the water, and we ran with the porpoises, and I'll never forget it. Paul.
You gave me a very difficult job to do here, Moses. May I have the slide, please? We go back to the days when wearing fur was not politically incorrect. And when you gave me this assignment to speak for 15 minutes without a script, I took it literally. And that's something that's good enough, thanks. That's something I'm unaccustomed to do, because over the years I've learned that there's power in words, and there's power in thinking about the structure of language so that it works. So let's try it. A number of people have asked me what I was going to talk about here, and various things have come into mind. After Sarush spoke the other day, I thought I might talk about fear. Because it seemed to me that there are some extraordinary demonstrations of human capacity that have taken place here amidst this marvelous tapestry that you've woven for us, Moses. And I started with Sydney, you know, when you walked in with this tiny girl, and she did that extraordinary thing that for the first time made me appreciate the Canadian national anthem. Certainly it was the first time a tear came to my eye when I heard it. And then we went through the first day, and there was this, I'm sorry, I heard, was it Isabel who was up there in the rafters on that red rope, demonstrating the power that we have when we forget that we're just mere mortals on earth. And then we went through Michelle and Juan and their extraordinary stories about how it's possible for us actually to be here without really necessarily paying total attention to the personal circumstances that we have and being bound by them. And so I happen to live in a place. May I have the first slide, please? The next image. That one. I thought I'd give you a map because I'm on the East Coast, and, or is it? I live in British Columbia, about 400 kilometers north of Vancouver Island, sort of in the center of that map there, in a place called Johnston Strait. And I live on a very small island. It's called Hanson Island. It's about 10 kilometers square. I live in that spot that has an X on it. And the reason I live there is it's orca habitat. It's an area that a population of orcas, we call them the Northern Resident Community of British Columbia orcas, comes into each year. There are about 200, at this point, about 208 members of this community, and they live in 34 little family groups. The families, we now understand, are centered around the mothers, and so each of these 34 families is a matriline. We have, over the years, developed a facility, we call it Orca Lab, that exists on the edge of an island, of this island. We're surrounded by forest, so it was pretty easy for us to come to appreciate the natural habitat. And over the years, we realized that there are various problems with studying whales. One is they're very mobile, so it's natural to want to jump in a boat and follow them around and so forth. But we also understood that there are impacts that people have on whales, and so we decided to try to develop a research methodology which didn't interfere with the whales' lives, but still enabled them to learn about us. So we developed Orca Lab, which is there, and we use spotting scopes, and we watch the whales when they go by. We have, over the years, learned to identify many of them. Other scientists, not ourselves, we use their work, have in fact identified every individual in this population and given each individual an alphanumeric identification. This is Sharky, A25. We've also developed an acoustic method, which enables us to listen to the undersea acoustic environment of about 50 square kilometers around us using hydrophones, which are hooked up to radio transmitters and broadcast a continuous signal. So we listen to this area for the sounds of the whales, and it turns out that you can identify the family groups because orca families have dialects. So just by listening, we can learn a lot. And so in our lab, we have a group of assistants who listen and make recordings for us. So we listen 24 hours a day around the years. And each year, we record about 1,000 hours of acoustic data. And from this information, we get to understand a lot about what the whales are doing. We also have developed land observation sites, and basically the philosophy here is that if we can observe enough about what the whales are doing and come to understand enough about their lifestyle, maybe this will give us some insights into them which will be useful in terms of our understanding, and there are various spin-off benefits as well. Orca families, as I mentioned, are centered around the mother. The mother in this case is the female that's in the mist back there. She's A12, sometimes often called scimitar because of the peculiar shape of her dorsal fin. Adult male orcas are much taller. They have much taller dorsal fins than females, so they're easy to see. And one of the things about male orcas is that the sons always stay with their mothers. Their whole life is spent with their mother. So here, A12 scimitar, she has two sons, one of whom is now dead, and a daughter that's in the foreground there, who's A34, Saimum is her name, and she now has 3 kids. It turns out she's a very interesting individual because we know almost to the day when each of her offspring was born. Actually, she has 4 kids, sorry. They're all born at the end of October or beginning of November. And so we had, in this instance, a very easy task in lots of ways because we can just sit in a place, the whales come to us, they come back year after year after year. we learn bits and pieces of the puzzle over the years. One of the very interesting things to think about, I suppose, in this respect, is time. And we've had some marvelous demonstrations here this week about what time really represents. We have various measures of time. For politicians, it's 4 years. For us, it's a short lifespan. But if you think about the whole picture, time is immense. So one of the things that's interesting to me in thinking about orcas is the flow of time, the continuity that occurs from one generation to another as the traditions, the family, and so forth are passed on. I have the next slide. One of the things about orca society that's so interesting to us is that it's peaceful. There is no overt demonstration of physical aggression or violence between individuals or groups. And I think you have to put this in context. You have to understand that orca is the most powerful animal in the ocean. It's the top of the predator-prey hierarchy. Literally has the ability to prey on anything that it wishes to. It has a literal power, life and death power over anything in the ocean. And so when you think about that and understand that orca society has become possibly an almost perfect demonstration of the way in which social animals can live together in harmony, makes you, I think, in a way, fall back on our own situation. We are powerful animals, but we haven't figured out how to live together. I think that's one of our basic problems. Not saying we can be orcas, but I think that having orca there as a demonstration of what is possible is perhaps useful to us. Now, this is interesting. If you recall Sandra's demonstration comment the other day about the perfect instrument we call our brain, and then understand that there are other large-brained animals on the planet. And that orca, for example, which has the second largest brain on the planet, the largest is held by the sperm whale, and that it's about 4 times the size of a human brain. And obviously complex in its construction. And if you then go on to make the presumption that brain is the basis of intelligence and the basis of everything that makes us human, begin to wonder. That's actually the point at which I met Orca. I was a physiological psychologist, what Sandra calls a cognitive neuroscientist back in the 60s. And I was introduced to, first of all, to Orca in the form of a brain floating in a jar on a laboratory shelf at UBC. And the question comes to mind, what does this animal do with this brain? I'm still trying to figure that out. But one of the things I think that's useful to speculate about, again, coming back to time, is the thought that if we have enough time, what happens to us? We're quite young as animals, as beings. We've been, when we scratch in the dirt, as we saw the other day, we go back 8,000 or 10,000 years and we find these marvelous demonstrations of what we were a short time ago. But where will we be 1 million years from now, if we get to that point? Well, orcas possess this brain for longer than that. And Orca lives in a perfect, non-violent, peaceful, cooperative society in which everything that is the basis for life, is immediately there on hand. There's no argument. They share each other's space. The population is small, despite unlimited resources. And they have, apart from us, no problem, probably. Could I have the cartoon, please? So time. Time is a very big deal, I think, because we have such a limited view of it here. And when you think about us and who we are, I think one of the things that comes to mind is the thought that there's only one of us. You know, we understand from the geneticists, you know, that we share almost 100% of DNA with chimpanzees. And I think there are probably explanations for that, which I won't get into. But when you think about the whales and the fact that, like us, they came out of the water, they went onto the land, and at a certain point they chose to go back into the land. You have to understand, I think, that time is an interesting question to look at, because the whales have actually been here for much, much, much longer than we are as successful animals. Moses, are you standing because I'm out of time?
You can think your way towards a conclusion.
Okay. Let me have the video, please. This is the area that I live in. And at a little place called Craycroft Point, which is from this perspective, we've established a video station. And my daughter, Anna, who put this video together, lives there during the summertime. And underwater, we've put 4 cameras, and they're in fixed locations, and they serve as little windows into the underwater world. And part of the reason for doing this is because it seems to me that one of the biggest problems we have as humans is our detachment from the natural world, our real failure to understand that we come from nature, that we're part of nature, and that our only salvation really lies in understanding that and in being kind towards nature. And so I sit there and I look through these little windows into the world of a kelp forest. And it's an extraordinarily beautiful world. Joe McGinnis the other day was telling us a little bit about that underwater world. And I think, and I've thought for some time, I suppose, that if we understood more about the world, what the world really is, then we might learn how to take care of it better. And many years ago, I stood on the deck of my home, and I looked at the mountains and the moon high above it, and I listened to the sounds of the whales going by, breathing in the air, and hearing their sounds underwater. And it was such a moment of perfect peace, and I thought to myself, if only I could share this moment with the whole world, it would know peace. And out of that moment's thought came the idea that we might be able to use technology to connect people to nature. We heard the other day how obviously difficult it is becoming for the natural world to take people into it. There are just too many of us, and the natural world is too vulnerable to the impacts that we have on it. So how do we get beyond that? When you as an eco-tourist go out to some marvelous natural place, you can't help being profoundly impacted by it. But we can't all go there, But then, you know, we didn't all have to go to the moon in order to appreciate the view of planet Earth that looking at it from space gave us. So I thought, let's see if we can establish some Earth stations. Let's see if we can use technology to put in place these systems that will enable us to see and to hear and to experience the natural world in places that none of us need go to. We could do it from our homes or from our school classrooms or wherever. And this idea, I called it a nature network, sort of sat there for a long time. It would have cost rather more than was feasible in those days, because it would have required ordinary satellite television technology and so forth to do it. But then the internet came along. And the internet is a marvelous tool because it enables us all to be connected at once. And so a couple of years ago, a Japanese corporation named NTT Data decided to fund a little experiment in connecting people remotely to nature. And so what we did last year was set up a website. It's called Orca Live. It's orca-live.net. And Anna, my daughter, spent the summer at Craycroft Point pointing her camera, surface camera at the whales, and then selecting one of these 4 underwater images to put onto the website. And it was just an experiment. This is a little image that one would see on a screen. It was about 2 centimeters wide by 1.5 centimeters deep. And the sound, the live sound of what was going on. Could we have some of the soundtrack on this come up a bit, please? So people would hear the sound of the whales if they were in acoustic range. During daylight hours, they would see whales or an image from this underwater world of the kelp forest and hang out with it. And the result was, to me, almost unbelievable. You know, the response from the audience. People would stay at home and not go to work to watch this. People would go to work and not be able to work because they were watching live. People would go to work and then they'd rush home and connect again. It was a profound. One of the after all the publicity about the Navy commander and the internet, I possibly shouldn't mention this, but a Canadian oceanographic vessel used to pipe the sounds of the orcas through the ship. And the crew used to sit around and make comments and answer questions. And it's marvelous. It turned out to be a marvelous learning tool because suddenly people all over the planet, and I think in the end there were 42 countries connected on this site. We had something like 22 million hits on it over a 6-month period. Suddenly people were all tuned in at the same moment to something that was happening now in nature. And it was a profound experience for them, as well as a profound understanding to us that this was important. One comment that came in from one of our audience said to us, "This tiny world is the oasis of my days." And this was somebody who works in an, actually no, he works as a computer programmer in a major Japanese corporation and works about 16 hours a day and goes home and logs on. In any event, this is over, Moses. In any event, I just want to say this. And that is that You know, this planet that we have, this tiny sphere, you know, one amongst, you can't even think about what the numbers represent. One amongst many. It's the only thing that we have, and it's so precious, and it's so abundant in its generosity towards us. And we have to, at some point, come to an understanding that that's what we have, and we're here now, and if we do the right thing by it, we will have time. So we, at this point of our emerging consciousness, stand here as we come out of the garden, standing on the edge of a wasteland, if you believe the climatologists, and we hold a seed in our hand and we let it fall. And in 1,000 years, we'll know what we've sown. Thank you.